Close your eyes and let the screen dissolve into birdsong and salt-tinged wind, an English spring morning in 1532 when parchment still outranked paper and the word Protestant sounded like the rattle of brand new artillery. Here, at Stanfield Hall in Norfolk, a newborn girl named Amy sees candlelight before daylight, bawling with the healthy gusto of a farmer's daughter. Her father, Sir John Robsart, a gentleman farmer in the Tudor sense, meaning wealthy enough to own 3 manors, yet provincial enough to smell of wet earth, puffs his chest with relief. Her mother, Elizabeth Appleyard, traces the sign of the cross in the newest, edgiest way. No priest, just whispered scripture, an unmistakable nod to the Reformed faith, licking across East Anglia like brush fire. Amy's cradle is oak, her blankets wool, but her destiny is already spun from threads of politics. Sir John's dependable harvest financed discreet donations to Lord Lisle and other reformist aristocrats. That money will, in ways none of them can imagine, catapult Amy straight into the lion's den of Tudor ambition. She grows surrounded by raucous cousins, pious tutors, and a private library thicker than the average parish priest's. Picture a freckled 8-year-old perched on the rude screen of St. Mary's, reciting Erasmus in faltering Latin while shepherd boys outside kick a pigskin ball. Her governess teaches her to write a hand so elegant it could pass for court calligraphy. More shocking, she's schooled in cipher, a skill reserved for men because East Anglia is smugglers' country and scripture is contraband. The dissolution of the monastery's claws at nearby abbeys. Burnt timber and charred hymnals pepper the horizon. Amy memorizes psalms set to clandestine tunes, her soprano ringing over barley fields. Even now, an invisible ledger tallies her assets: beauty, literacy, Protestant zeal, each entry raising her market value in the matrimonial exchange. Fast forward to Shrovetide 1549. Norwich hosts a tourney dazzling enough to make Venice blush, staged by none other than John Dudley, now Duke of Northumberland, and de facto Prime Minister to boy King Edward VI. Amy, 17, accompanies her parents to watch tilting matches, more intrigued by the caparisons than the combat. Then one knight dismounts, removes his gilt sallet, and flicks damp curls from his brow. Robert Dudley radiates reckless charisma, second son, trained in Greek, geometry, and the dangerous art of charming anyone breathing. He's been captain of horse in Scotland, spoken fluent Italian at Antwerp, and danced the galliard with Princess Elizabeth under a cedar arbor at Chelsea. Now he bows to Amy, jokes about her miniature pomander, and the world contracts to the space between 2 accelerated heartbeats. Courtiers roll eyes. Robert flirts for sport, but Sir John notices genuine softness in the young man's grin. That evening, while Norwich Cathedral's bells peal away Lent, Robert begs permission to ride west to Stanfield Hall for fellowship in the gospel. Translation: I want to court your daughter, and yes, we'll discuss Calvin on the way. Within months, letters fly. Robert's sprawling italics praising Amy's luminous judgment. Amy's neat secretary hand countering with anecdotes about lambing season. Gossip scribes sniff out a marriage of affection, a phrase so rare it crackles like lightning. John Dudley objects mildly. Robert should net a princess, not a country gentlewoman. Yet the Duke calculates political optics. He needs Norfolk's Protestant gentry thrilled with Dudley ascendancy. He relents. June 4th, 1550. Sheen Palace glitters with cloth of silver and scandal, as Edward VI, age 13, records in his diary, Lord Robert Dudley married to Mistress Robsart. The bride's dowry is small, the guest list colossal. William Cecil clenches his jaw and mutters that this match carnal will end in tears. For one shimmering night, though, Amy floats on a current of vials, sugar rose petals, and a groom who steals kisses between brand slight blessings. Married life begins in Verdon, Hertfordshire, at Cheshunt Manor, an estate on loan from Robert's elder brother. Amy fills rooms with Turkish carpets, Italian lustres, and an entire aviary of nightingales. Her appetite for beauty is matched only by her talent for accounts. She logs every yard of velvet, every servant's stipend. When Robert rides to court, she drafts him pocket ledgers so he can track his wages as master of the cupbearers. She also sends cheese, Norfolk's finest, because nobles at Whitehall complain the king's kitchens skimp on dairy. Robert, charming but chronically broke, adores her practicality. They exchange playful ciphers. A goosequill stands for love, a hawthorn sprig for longing. For 3 years, their correspondence sings like a madrigal, and then the madrigal shifts into a dirge. Early 1553, Edward VI coughs blood, scribes a radical device for succession, and allows John Dudley to puppet master his fading will. The plan leaps over Catholic Mary and even Protestant Elizabeth to land on Lady Jane Grey, John's brand new daughter-in-law. Amy barely adjusts to calling Jane sister before the king dies, and Jane is hustled to the Tower as queen in nothing but shock and pearls. 9 days later, Mary's forces thunder onto Tower Hill, banners stitched with pomegranates and vengeance. Robert gallops south with his father's militia, fails to halt the tide, and ends up shackled in the same fortress as Elizabeth, now suspected of complicity. Amy remains in London lodgings, counting her heartbeat against distant cannonades. Robert's Tower diary, sadly lost, allegedly contained laments to Amy, but we do possess Lieutenant Sir John Gage's log noting her persistent visits. Amy bribes guards with quince jelly and French buttons, smuggling letters inside folded handkerchiefs. She petitions Mary's Privy Council for leniency, using Cecil as a go-between, and stage manages a choir of Norfolk gentry who swear Robert is a man of unsullied conscience. It takes 6 months, 2 intercessions by Spanish nobles, and a £10,000 bond. But Robert and his brothers finally drag their chains across the drawbridge to freedom. Amy meets him at Durham House, sobs against a jerkin that smells of damp stone, and tries not to shiver when she hears Lady Jane's head fell with a single stroke. Yet victory tastes like ash. The crown seizes Dudley lands, revenue disappears, and polite society treats the family like plague vectors. Amy sells pearls to pay footmen. Robert borrows from creditors at interest rates fierce enough to fell an ox. Worse, Mary's religious reversal sparks bonfires of Protestant martyrs, and Amy's reformist Bibles could cost her a hand. She hides them behind Spanish devotional prints, praying Mary's spies can't decipher English bindings. In October 1554, Philip of Spain arrives to marry Mary and restore Catholic orthodoxy. Strangely, he takes a liking to Robert's cavalry skills and offers minor court positions, a lifeline as slim and slippery as an eel. Amy follows Robert to Hampton Court, but Mary's glare freezes the blood in her veins. She realizes she is welcome only when Philip happens to request Robert's presence at hunting banquets. Otherwise, she retreats to country houses borrowed from sympathetic cousins. 2 years drift by. Amy buries her father. Inheritance negotiations stall because Mary must approve every Protestant land transfer. She buries her mother too, and suddenly she is an only child, swaddled in grief thicker than Norfolk fog. Still, the estate income finally trickles through. Sitterstone rents, apple orchard yields, rights to a barley mill near Walsingham. She invests in sheep. Wool is England's lifeblood, and writes Robert that one day they will regain Dudley prestige on honest earnings. He replies with optimism, then disappears for weeks, summoned to martial exercises in Calais or board meetings with Spanish merchants. When he does visit, he is affectionate yet restless, pacing as though the future claws at his boots. November 17th, 1558, Queen Mary breathes her last amid the sour scent of pomanders and unresolved war. The bells that toll her passing morph into jubilant peals for Elizabeth's accession. Robert races downriver to Hatfield, hurling himself to one knee as Elizabeth steps beneath an oak to greet counselors. Their eyes lock, a laser beam of shared childhood secrets, and she names him Master of the Horse on the spot. Amy, reading the proclamation days later, feels pride curdle into apprehension. That title means Robert must reside near the Queen's bedchamber, orchestrate jousts, inspect stables at dawn, stand guard during every nocturnal progress. Synonyms: perpetual absence, endless temptation, career resurrection built on marital erosion. Spring 1559 explodes like gunpowder. Elizabeth's coronation glow hasn't dimmed before envoys from Sweden, France, and the Holy Roman Empire jostle to marry her. She parries each proposal with coquettish wit, yet everyone sees where her gaze lands. Robert Dudley, strutting in crimson silk beside the royal litter. Amy decamps to Throcking, Hertfordshire, living with trusted friends John and Anne Hyde. She writes Robert breezy letters about saffron harvest and falcon chicks, masking loneliness behind horticultural trivia. Sometimes, though, she folds the parchment around raw pleas. Come north, we have apples ready for cider. Robert answers, with promises pinned to unspecific dates. Then the rumors begin. Early June, the Spanish ambassador Guzman de Silva writes Philip II that Amy suffers from a malady in one of her breasts, which is a disease that is often fatal. The news flashes across Antwerp and Brussels, feeding a narrative that God himself clears Robert's marital obstacle. Elizabeth, overheard by her ladies, allegedly murmurs she would give half her kingdom to see Mistress Dudley buried. Whether she actually says it or whether jealous courtiers embellish matters, the phrase sticks like pitch. Balls and banquets ripple with jokes about poisoned possets. Every time Robert drinks hippocras from the Queen's goblet, someone smirks. Amy's health, paradoxically, seesaws. That Easter, Robert finally takes leave to visit her 4 nights. Local bailiffs note she walks the orchard with a shawl but no cane. She arranges tenant leases, audits maid wages, and even designs a new Dudley crest combining the bear and ragged staff with a Norfolk hawthorn sprig. Yet appetite fails, weight drops. Her stays hang loose. She suspects cancer because she's seen cows riddled with tumors slump in similar misery. But she also suspects heartbreak. The human body, like timber, cracks along fault lines invisible until the pressure rises. May 1559, determined not to vanish quietly, Amy hires a robust litter and lumbers to London, lodging at Kingston with family friends, William and Martha Odingsells. She visits apothecaries, tries wild strawberry infusions, sits for a miniature portrait by Lavina Tierling, the Flemish genius who captures sadness in a single glint of paint. When Elizabeth's barge glides past on the Thames, Amy glimpses her rival framed by cloth of gold curtains, Robert standing too close. She lowers her veil. City gossips note she never attends court though invited. Whether invitation is sincere or rhetorical, no one can tell. Still, the Spanish ambassador, meeting her briefly at a garden supper, records surprise at her better complexion than rumored. The contradiction fuels conspiracy theories. If she looks passably healthy, maybe she must be murdered rather than die conveniently on schedule. Robert, meanwhile, roams Whitehall's galleries with the easy entitlement of a man reborn. Elizabeth teases him in front of foreign ambassadors, calling him eyes because she trusts no one else to witness her moods. He marshals pageants where knights slam lances while fireworks sketch the queen's initials across soot-dark skies. After each triumph, he rides home in a litter of rose petals, drunk on adoration. Sober mornings bring reality. Creditors still chase him. Parliament balks at grants, and his wife sends parchment dotted with tear spatter. The friction between duty and desire flays him raw, yet in every moral standoff he leans toward ambition. August drips humid. Elizabeth detours to Windsor. Robert attends her daily, reviewing crossbow drills and racing Spanish stallions across the long walk. Amy, by contrast, relocates again, this time to Cumnor Place near Oxford, the seat of Sir Anthony Forster, one of Robert's senior stewards. The house is roomy, the deer park idyllic, the local cloth trade prosperous. Forster's wife loves embroidery and promises Amy distraction from pain. Robert suggests the move in letters surviving only as docket notes, but his financial fingerprints grease the arrangement. He pays Forster an annual fee for Amy's board, implicitly admitting he cannot provide a stable household himself. September 8, 1560, dawn breaks clear after overnight rain. Citrus-tinged sunlight slants through lattice panes of Amy's chamber, catching dust motes in violent gold. She dismisses her servants for the day, an order multiple witnesses will confirm with shaky signatures. Some hurry to Abingdon's Fair, others to St. Michael's for morning mass. Only 2 remain in ground floor rooms. Hours pass in opaque silence. Around noon, a crash reverberates through the central staircase, a 15-foot oak spiral clinging to the stone walls without balusters. By the time servants sprint upstairs, Amy lies crumpled on flagstones, neck bent at an impossible angle, pearl gray gown pooled like watered silk. No witness sees her fall. A neighbor physician pries open eyelids, declares life extinguished. That night, a messenger on a black gelding slashes 25 miles to Windsor, barging into Robert's chambers as he polishes the Queen's saddle. His scream, reportedly, draws guards. He staggers, collapses, mutters, "My wife is dead, broken neck. Pray God it be false." Elizabeth, alerted mid-mask, allegedly grips a tapestry so hard her knuckles blanch. She whispers, "The world will shame us," and orders Robert to quarantine himself from her presence until he is rightly cleared of every ill imagination. Court gossip ignites like straw. Robert dispatches Thomas Blount, clever, meticulous, to Cumnor with unlimited coin and authority. Blount interviews chambermaids, grooms, the carpenter who last waxed the staircase, even the Abingdon baker who sold Amy saffron buns 3 days prior. His letters survive. He labels Amy strange of mind, recounts her fixation on wanting servants gone, notes her wrath when they demurred. One maid swears Amy declared, "I shall be rid of all trouble tomorrow." Another recalls her weeping over a miniature of Robert and shouting, "I am not made of marble." Blount collates testimony until stories blur. He begs Robert for instruction. Push the coroner toward suicide verdict or stand back and risk murder charges? Robert replies, "Let truth decide. I fear God more than man." Cynics snicker. The coroner, Richard Smith, convenes a jury of 15 local gentlemen on September 17th. Surviving documents record the gruesome details. 2 lacerations to the head, one a 1/4 inch deep, the second 1/2 inch, plus a snapped neck vertebra described as crushed as a thing rotten. They note no defensive wounds, no torn sleeves, no sign of strangulation. Final verdict, misfortune. The word proves wonderfully ambiguous. Accident stamped with divine sovereignty, suicide politely denied, murder diplomatically dismissed. Whether jurors feel pressured by Robert's rank is debated to this day, but Blount's expense ledger lists only lodging and ale, not bribes. Still, rumor outruns parchment. Within a week, balladeers in Cheapside chant refrains of Dudley Did It to the tune of Greensleeves. Robert bankrolls a funeral at St. Mary the Virgin, Oxford, on September 21st. Torches fill the nave with oily light, clerks in black cope drone psalms. 54 poor men in new gowns receive pennies to pray for Amy's soul. Robert stays in queue, claiming grief and protocol forbid attendance. Elizabeth orders no court revels for 6 months, yet refuses full mourning dress, choosing jewel-toned satins to signify ambiguous solidarity. Ambassadors telegraph to Europe that the Queen's marriage market is either dead or hot, depending on who writes and what hour they sent the cipher. If Robert hopes his widowhood grants Elizabeth's hand, he miscalculates. Parliament drafts petitions begging the Queen not to marry her horsemaster. Scottish diplomats leak stories of Amy's suspicious staircase. French envoys escalate them into stage plays. Elizabeth, ever attuned to popular mood, concludes wedlock with Robert equals abdication by scandal. She keeps him dangling, doling favors. Kenilworth Castle here, a patent on sweet wines there, while flirting with Austrian archdukes and Swedish princes. Robert buries himself in statecraft, engineering naval expeditions, taming Irish insurgents, but personal bliss remains phantom. In 1578, in a twist dripping with irony, he secretly weds Lettice Knollys, the Queen's own cousin. Elizabeth erupts, banning Lettice from court and calling her she-wolf. Robert endures frosty silences until his death in 1588, leaving behind letters in which he still references "my first and true wife Amy," as though guilt long outlives gossip. As for Amy's earthly remains, they survive Reformation iconoclasm, Civil War soldiers, and Victorian treasure hunters until 1904, when vandals pry open her lead coffin in a midnight dare. They find only dust and a patch of velvet, color indiscernible, perhaps once dove gray. Oxford authorities re-enter what they can, sealing the vault with Portland cement, posting a bronze plaque too modest for tourists to Instagram. Yet local lore refuses cement. On stormy nights, students claim to hear a rustle down the nave, heels clicking, then a soft tumble echoing upward, as though the staircase descends into the very stones. Modern science tries to declaw the legend. Osteopaths model torsional force on period staircases, concluding a slip from the top step could indeed fracture cervical vertebra C2, the way records describe. Oncologists note that metastatic breast cancer often causes dizziness and brittle bone, heightening fall risk. Forensic psychologists remind us that despair, untreated pain, and spiritual terror, suicide meant eternal damnation, could drive someone to orchestrate an accident that looks accidental. Conversely, criminologists tally motive. Robert gains queen crown consort, unimaginable power. But he also risks everything if caught, and loose tongues abound in Tudor households. No definitive knife exists, no whitened arsenic spoon. History ducks closure. And yet beyond the whodunit, Amy's story radiates larger truths. She embodies the peril of loving ambitiously, in a world where ambition is a contact sport. Her death, whether self-authored or externally scripted, reroots England's monarchy. Elizabeth never marries, passes the crown to Stuart cousins, paving the path toward civil war, constitutional monarchy, and eventually the global Britannia most of us learn in textbooks. Had Amy lived, or had she died without scandal, Robert might have ascended beside Elizabeth. Their heirs might have blended York, Tudor, and Dudley bloodlines, averting dynastic anxiety and maybe even pacifying Ireland sooner, altering colonial timelines from Virginia to Bombay. Butterfly wings and cannon fire. Butterflies sometimes flap harder than cannons. So pictures a closing scene. A modern commuter train rattles through Oxfordshire twilight, its carriage lights flickering over commuters scrolling headlines about celebrity divorces and influencer scandals. None of them notice the hedge line where Cumnor Place once stood, long since demolished, its oak staircase splintered into firewood centuries ago. Yet somewhere in the collective subconscious of English storytelling, a woman in brocade still stands at the top step, poised between dignity and despair, waiting to learn whether history will cast her as tragic accident, martyr of royal lust, or architect of her own escape. 500 years on, every retelling tries to decide, and every retelling keeps her alive a little longer, voice quivering but unbroken, demanding that we look past the gossip and ask a simpler, harder question. What does it cost a human heart to live at the intersection of love and power? In that question lies the true legacy of Amy Robsart. Not the mystery of her fall, but the clarity of her echo. An echo that reminds us every headline, whether inked on vellum or flashed on AMOLED, is built from real breaths, real pulses, and choices that sometimes tumble into tragedy before the ink even has time to dry.